The monster in the dark. The wasteland was silent. No wind, no life, only the ruins of a once great city standing like broken bones. The sky was always dark, covered by thick clouds of ash. It had been this way for years. Nothing lived here anymore. Except her. Zira moved through the shadows, her glowing yellow eyes scanning the dead city. Her sharp claws clicked lightly against the cracked ground. She was fast, silent, a predator in the ruins. She had lived here alone for so long that she had forgotten the sound of another voice. She was the last of her kind. Or so she thought. That night, something changed. As Zira prowled through the remains of an old building, she heard something strange. A faint, steady sound. A sound she had not heard in years. A heartbeat. She froze. Her claws tightened against the stone. Her breath slowed. Her ears twitched. Not an animal. Not a machine. A living being. Her first thought was that it was another monster, something like her. But the heartbeat was different. Softer, weaker. Carefully, Zira followed the sound. She moved through the dark streets, her body blending with the shadows. She climbed over fallen walls, stepping over skeletons of long-dead creatures. A heartbeat grew louder. Then she saw him. A figure lay on the ground, half buried under metal and rubble. His suit was torn, his face covered in dust and blood. His breathing was rough, but he was alive. A human. Zira had heard stories about humans, but she had never seen one in real life. Her people once spoke of them as dangerous, clever, unstoppable. They were said to be warriors, conquerors, survivors. But this one looked fragile. His eyes flickered open. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, he turned his head and looked directly at her. Zira expected fear, expected him to scream, to crawl away, to beg for his life. But the human did none of those things. Instead, he smiled. "Figures," he muttered, voice weak but calm. "I survive a crash, only to get eaten by a monster." Zira blinked. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. The human coughed and tried to sit up, but his body was too weak. He groaned in pain and fell back. Still, his eyes never left Zira. "Are you gonna kill me or what?" he asked. Zira did not reply. She did not know what to say. She had spent her entire life being the monster in the dark. Everyone feared her. Everyone ran from her. But this human, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't running. And for the first time in her life, Zira hesitated. But then, a deep, guttural roar echoed through the ruins. Zira's eyes snapped up. The sound sent a chill through her spine. She knew that sound. Something else was out there. Something far worse than her. The human heard it too. His face tensed. His breathing grew faster. "What the hell was that?" he asked. Zira didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head sharply, listening. The roar was getting closer. Something was hunting them. The human tried to move again, but he was too weak. He struggled, his arms shaking. "Great," he muttered. "If the monster doesn't kill me, whatever made that sound definitely will." Zira clenched her jaw. This was not her fight. She could leave. She could vanish into the darkness and let the human face whatever was coming. That was the way of the wasteland. The strong survived. The weak died. And yet, she looked at him. His face was pale. His breaths were shallow. But his eyes were still sharp, still strong. For the first time in years, Zira felt something strange in her chest. A feeling she had forgotten. A choice she had never made before. The roar came again, closer this time. The ground trembled. Dust fell from the broken walls. Zira stepped forward. The human looked at her, confused. "What are you doing?" he asked. Zira's claws flexed. She turned her glowing eyes toward him and growled. "Helping you." The human blinked, surprised. Then, after a moment, he grinned. "Well, that's new. Another roar. Louder. Closer. Zira reached down, grabbed the human by the arm, and pulled him up. He winced in pain but did not protest. Then, without another word, Zira turned and ran into the darkness, carrying the human with her. Behind them, the true nightmare of the wasteland finally appeared. And it was hungry.